Today, I am continuing my analysis of Palantir's Q1 earnings report and subsequent conference call. Yesterday, I released a video detailing and overviewing the slide deck from the earnings release, and today I'm going to focus more on the conference call, particularly the Q&A portion of the call. I'll get to that to highlight my key takeaways, and also talk about the recent stock movement. Let's go. So kicking it off with the stock movement, we have a macro sell-off today, leading Palantir lower. Of course, this is a little difficult to digest, especially giving away some of those gains from yesterday, and that lack of strength coming off of the earnings is not very encouraging. But the stock is currently, as I record this, higher than it was on the close of Monday, so still a net gain there as it stands one day later. And also, Cathie Wood jumped in with ARK Invest and bought more in ARK K and ARK W, a tremendous amount actually. So I thought that was definitely of note, and you'll see their position size has grown dramatically. And today I actually re-listened to the conference call and I took some notes. Here they are. We had 4 members of management on the call. We had COO Sankar, Rodney Nelson, head of IR, was pretty much leading the call, and then David was the CFO, along with Kevin Kawasaki, who's the global head of business development. Notably missing from the call, Alex Karp. Personally, I would love to hear more from him, especially on these types of quarterly conference calls, myself as an investor. Last quarter, I believe they had a pre-recorded segment, and in Q3, I don't think he was on the call either. So it would be nice, at a very minimum, for them to include a pre-recorded segment if he is indeed going to stay away from the calls for some reason. But we did get a segment from him recently, which was posted on YouTube, and that I analyzed not too long ago, so perhaps that was pulled forward ahead of the conference call, instead of being included in it. So overall, these were my takeaways from the call. They talked about a relentless focus on product innovation, and this is something I love to hear from a company, no matter what they're attacking. Their innovation needs to be at a high rate. So what is some of that innovation? Well, Palantir talked about micro models for AI at scale and Operation AI for commercial use. Their overarching goal is to be the most important software company in the world. Now, I think of that statement more as an eventual result of the work Palantir puts in. And I realize this is something Karp has said before, but it's such a blanket statement that I don't think I would necessarily believe any company that says it if they did not have products and services to back up that goal. But with Palantir's privacy focuses and platform innovations, I do currently tend to believe them on that goal. And it is more of a subjective thing. They're not saying they will be the most valuable. They also aren't saying they won't be. They're striving to be the most important. And I personally hypothesize that will lead to value creation in the future. They talked about how stock-based compensation expense, the expense as a whole, will normalize over the next couple years, and then it doesn't really create meaningful dilution at this point. Equity through stock-based compensation is the fundamental investor and employee alignment mechanism, Sankar said, and it's a long-term orientation in order to maximize business results. They were talking a lot about how the entire business is gaining momentum, which is great to hear. All verticals, all segments of Palantir. And they said how a lot of defense-related activities are coming up in the pipeline. So they may be referring to that potential spending that Palantir could get a chunk of. And as I said earlier, the pace of innovation is what is so impressive. Sankar said this, and he said Palantir is relentlessly iterating on its platforms. After all, that's what creates such a great product and experience. They said they're investing heavily in the business with sales and product R&D, and also they touched on the reopening culture for their company in particular. They want to get as many people as they can back into the workplace, get that culture going again. So I thought that was worth noting as well. And moving on to the growth potential. Currently, they only have a handful of Fortune 500 client companies, and Palantir only makes up 0.1% of annual defense spend. Again, coming back to that defense topic, it makes me think a lot is coming in way of defense for Palantir, spending that is. They started building a direct sales force in February and remain on track to add triple-digit headcount this year, and this is applying force behind the business. It's worth noting that they weren't growing from a large sales force to begin with, so triple-digit headcount is going to be a large percentage growth, but again, not building off of such a large base. So going from hypothetically only 10 sales employees to 110 would be an 11x output. We'll see if that does indeed translate over to the financials in the coming quarters and years. And then Sankar brought up this idea of a flywheel, and this may sound familiar familiar to those of you that have been following me on this channel, because I brought up this exact same idea, and I even illustrated my own flywheel and labeled it. So it makes me wonder either if Palantir saw that video, which some of you may deem unlikely, or in the other case, I've accurately assessed the business. But either way, I found it interesting how they are now using the same verbiage as I did earlier on in my analysis of the company. And this is the first time I've heard this from them, and it's pretty much in direct relation to my representation. And Sankar was saying how clients now come with an understanding of Palantir already, which I have to assume is a function of Palantir's marketing, i.e. demo days like the double-click series. So perhaps that marketing is panning out. And they say they are seeing a good conversion from pilots to revenue. And they talked about the aggregate flywheel acceleration, where the ramps are getting faster and the converting of revenues is getting faster, which is quite bullish to use Sankar's phrasing. And he said they're seeing acceleration across all dimensions. So now moving on to the Q&A. Does the company intend to turn a profit in 2021 or use resources to expand? They said they're going to focus on two metrics: adjusted free cash flow, which is the business's ability to generate cash, and adjusted operating margin, which is the measure of profitability, as they say, excluding stock-based compensation. They say we're currently at the beginning of a move down market, and it's a huge market to go after. Right now, they're not so focused on profitability. They're focused on investing in the business and increasing its revenue base. So I like the sound of that. I'm after growth companies in which to invest my money. Profitability is great because it demonstrates the financial viability and strength of a business. But take some of the most successful growth companies for example, and you will see that the more you invest early on, the greater the outcome, no matter at which point you hit profitability. And to touch on the SPACs, this was my question. I'm not going to read through it, but they said they're relentlessly focused on increasing distribution, and they have the unique and compelling opportunity to invest in these management teams and businesses, which are focused on winning with Palantir's software. And they're building out using Palantir from day zero, Palantir Foundry that is, as the backbone of their operations. This is how critical Palantir software is. It can literally power an entire business, or at least the main categories of one. Palantir said they're interested in backing companies with ambitious goals to execute on Palantir's ability to move down market. So there we have it. That was Palantir's ultimate response to the question as to why they are investing in SPACs. They're doing it because they have a unique opportunity to do so, since they have identified these as proper investment opportunities, and also because they are partnering with these companies. And why not benefit from their success as well in a monetary sense? So then there was a question if Palantir plans to compete with Microsoft. So this was not a top question from Say, and one which Palantir specifically handpicked to answer, which I found interesting. They say their only competition is competing against customers' own desire to build their own solutions. They're not competing against other software companies. And they say to expect more from the modern operating system. It's not a choice on the front lines. You have to have a modern operating system. Otherwise, you're going to lose. You're going to lose on operating efficiency. You're going to lose on capital efficiency and every other kind of efficiency there is. Palantir is striving to develop products with a goal of alpha generation for customers to win in whatever they do. Now we get to Bitcoin. Will Palantir ever own Bitcoin on its balance sheet? Now I did a moonshot video on this before the earnings report, and I got a number of people disagreeing with me and a good amount of dislikes, but it turns out I was pretty spot on in that video. If you want to watch it for more context as to my thoughts on the investment potentially in the future, you can go ahead and check that out after this one. But basically the short answer is yes, they are considering it. They're thinking about it and discussing it internally as to whether they want to include it on the balance sheet. It's on the table from both treasury and investment perspectives. Also, they do accept it as a form of payment, which I find very interesting, because since they're a B2B company, to be paid in Bitcoin, it would have to be other businesses paying them. And as far as I know, I don't think there are very many businesses with Bitcoin that are also using Palantir. Now, of course, this will change in the future as more businesses adopt Bitcoin and as more businesses adopt Palantir, and that exchange becomes more frequent. But I do have a conspiracy for you. I saw on Twitter that someone noticed how Palantir showed a picture from SpaceX in their slide deck. And I also know that SpaceX has purchased Bitcoin, as Elon Musk has done so personally and also with Tesla. So perhaps there is a link there. Of course, this is just a conspiracy, but I do think SpaceX, if they were to be a partner, which I'm not saying they are, and I don't think they would be, because Elon likes to do everything on his own. That could be a potential example of what could happen for Bitcoin as a payment for Palantir. And another one of my questions, very grateful that Palantir was answering my questions, and thank you to you guys for voting them up, was about moving downstream to medium-sized businesses. They said the short answer is yes, they're seeing demand from those smaller and mid-sized businesses. And they signed up a number of small and medium-sized businesses recently, and they say they will continue to do so as they widen their distribution. Their sales cycle is speeding up, increasing efficiencies of operations, again tying back to the flywheel. And they got interest from companies from all over tuning in to the demo events. And finally, a question about Palantir and whether Palantir reaches out to individual companies or whether they're waiting for others to reach out to them. So basically they said Palantir had to start by reaching out to connect with the people trying to solve the problems, and then they were able to entice that client as a customer. But basically those that are not trying to solve the problems don't understand Palantir as a need. But basically me reading between the lines is that now it's a split between customers coming to them and the sales force making the connection. So that was my takeaway from the conference call. As I said, I did my earnings report overview yesterday. Today I covered the second half with Palantir's conference call. So I hope it was insightful to hear my specific thoughts on everything that they cover. Again, I think this was a bullish call, and there's a lot to take away, parse, and think about for the company. Let me know if there's anything specifically you want me to cover more in depth, and thank you very much for watching. Until next time.